Will it be blazers or babies? How do you balance career and parenting in a modern African family? Join the conversation with real people and real situations every week on the Life Work Podcast from Blazers and Baby, hosted by Isioma Asiodu Otugo. The Life Work Podcast from Blazers and Baby. Affirmations, roadmaps, and conversations for the modern African family.
Hello, you're welcome to Life Walk with Blazers and Baby. Today we're having a conversation with Ladi Okuneye. Thanks for joining us on Life Walk with Blazers and Baby.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, I usually start with this question, this tagline: how do you take care of yourself?
How do I take care of myself? I take care of myself by making sure that I have some key rituals built into my life. Some of those rituals are having a spiritual practice to start off my day. I start off each day with meditation, with prayers, and just some time to reflect. I am also a bit of a fitness buff, so I try to exercise at least 4 to 6 times a week sometimes. And as long as I'm able to do that and also spend as much time as I possibly can with my family, I'm typically in good shape, regardless of what else could be going on in the world. So that's how I take care of myself.
Thanks, Ladi. The way you find time to do that amongst everything you do, taking care of yourself is priority, because that's what helps you take your body and mind to all the other roles you have to play in your life.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Earlier, we're talking about our personalities and how our personalities influence the way we respond to events and things around us. I would like to know more about that.
Okay, so for most people, we're born with a view of the world, of a world that's perfect, right? You're born into this world as a child. You have these caregivers who are your parents, and in your eyes, they can do no wrong. You cry, they do what they can to soothe you, to make you feel better. They feed you, they clothe you. You learn from them, and they're basically your image of, should I say, God. They're there, and they solve all your problems for you. And that goes on fine, probably until you're about 6, 7, 8 years old. And then somewhere in that age bracket, you start to realize that the world is not perfect, because you're able to process information a lot better. You are starting to become exposed to some of the negative sides of the world. You are starting to, probably by that age, you're starting to become aware of when your parents caution you or discipline you. You're starting to become a lot more aware that there are certain things that you are doing that you are not, quote unquote, doing right, because when you do them, it doesn't get you the results that you're looking for. So probably as early as between the ages of 6 to 8, kids are processing this. And when they're processing this realization, it affects all of them in different ways. It affects different kids in different ways. So for some kids, they become a lot more drawn to the emotion of sadness, for example, because they've realized that the world isn't perfect. And so what they decide then to do is they are going to focus their energies on focus that sadness on making sure that other people are not sad, for example. So some kids might become helpers, okay? There'll be that child who realizes that, okay, well, when I do what mommy or uncle or whoever it is, when I help them feel good, then I'm valued, I'm okay. So you might have some kids who have that sort of a reaction. Then you might have some who realize that, you know what? Yeah, this thing called feelings, it doesn't get me what I want. What gets me what I want is when I perform. So they then decide that, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus all my energy on performing. I will be the best student I can be. I'll be the best at sports or whatever it is that they find themselves good at. And again, they're doing that because they're starting to realize that the world values certain things. So in their lens, they're looking at life through the lens of, okay, the world values me for what I'm able to do. So they start to tie their value to that. And what they then decide to do is, as long as I'm performing, then I don't have to be sad because there will always be people singing my praises. Okay. And I can keep going on and on. I mean, there's also other kids who have a totally different type of response. There are kids who have a response of fear. Okay. And the way that ends up playing out in their lives, it also differs. So you might have some kids who decide that, okay, the way I'm going to manage that fear is to make sure that I know everything I need to know about the world, so that I can be self-sufficient. So they're the kids who end up looking more like bookworms. They're a bit more introspective. They like to read a lot. They like to spend a lot of time consuming information because they find safety in information. They end up not being very connected to their feelings. So they might come across as aloof, as if they're not interested in other people. They might come across as they're only interested in their gadgets and creating things and stuff like that. But it's just their own way of feeling safe. Okay. It's their own way of feeling safe. Then you might have other kids who are on the totally opposite side of that spectrum as well. They too are dealing with fear, right? Because they've realized that the world is not perfect and the world has the possibility to hurt you. So what they end up doing is they try their best to try and experience all the good things life has to offer as a way of avoiding their fears, as a way of avoiding pain. So these are the kids who are very, very jovial. They're the life of the party. They're always up for the next adventure, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to create new experiences for their lives that will help them dull whatever pain or frustration they might have experienced. And they've seen that that is something that works for them as they go through life. And then you might also have other kids who realize, when they realize that the world is not perfect, the emotion that they start to get comfortable with is anger. So some of them might decide that, okay, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I'm strong and I'm assertive and I can stand up for myself and I can stand up for other people who might not be able to stand up for themselves. So they come across as being a bit more of the control freak. They are, they come across as, they might even, seem a little bit like a bully, but they're basically just trying to use that anger and that strength and that confrontational attitude to mask the fact that they too, they're managing some sort of fears. They're managing some sort of tenderness that has come from the realization that the world is not what they thought it would be. And there's other reactions to anger as well. But ultimately, these are the things that end up shaping our personalities, just to kind of bring that particular point home. So when a kid goes through all of this, these are the things that then start to shape the values that are important to him. And so he starts to try certain things, okay? And when they work for him, okay, once those things start to work for him, he says to himself, okay, this is how I need to be in the world. Now, bear in mind that that image of who he feels he needs to be in the world is being shaped by what he thinks the people in his life that he loves want him to be. Okay, so he starts being that way. We all start off as children being who we think the people that we love actually want us to be. Yeah. So and the thing is, when you start doing something and it works for you, you don't bother using the other parts of you that don't work as well. So for example, we all respond to life in one of three ways, because God has created all of us actually with three different brains. I mean, there's our thinking brain, which we all know, but even our emotions are a brain as well. Our emotions also speak to us. Even our instincts also speak to us. Okay, there are times when you don't have any data to back something up, but your instinct tells you that's the right thing to do. So our instincts do speak to us. So we all use these things to respond to life. So anytime something happens in life, we have an automatic response. It's either what do I think, what do I feel, or what am I going to do? So if you're one of those kids who leans more on their feelings, okay, if you're very feeling expressive and it working for you, so let's say, for example, you are growing up and you're a kid who thought you were smart and you used to either like to write stuff and you show it to your parents and they just kind of look at it and be like, please, what's this? You've been rejected and you're now realizing that, okay, that's not what's important to this particular parent. But then if that same parent is cooking in the kitchen and you see that they like when someone comes to help them and then all of a sudden you now realize that, okay, I still want that person's love and affection, so I'm going to go into the kitchen and go and start helping. All of a sudden, you will start using that as a framework for the rest of your life. You subconsciously make the decision that as long as I am helping other people, okay, as long as I'm able to read people's emotions and understand what they need and position myself to help them, I will get what I want out of life. So you now start focusing all your energy on your ability to use your feeling brain. But remember, you have these two other brains. You have your thinking brain and you have your instinctual brain. So what tends to happen is you will feel first, because that's the one that tends to work for you the most. You might support it with one of the other brains, one of the other intelligences. For example, you might think second, but then you would hardly ever use your instincts, okay? Because like I said, people responded to you when you understood how to access feelings. Then you supported that with thinking. Then you will hardly ever need your instincts for anything. So you'll be cruising through life from when you're young like that, okay? Without really using your instincts as much. But then you will eventually get to a point in your life where your inability to trust your instincts and read your instincts will become a problem for you. So let's say, for example, that same child who has become this helper through life has been able to succeed through life by always being able to understand what other people need. Yeah, they're relatively intelligent, so they're also able to leverage their thinking brain, and they're doing okay. But then they now want to be an entrepreneur, and you know the role of instincts in being an entrepreneur. But they might struggle with being able to trust their instincts because they haven't been using it for such a big part of their lives. So they now need to go on this journey of figuring out, okay, well, how do I start to trust my instinct? What are the things I need to do to be able to actually build up my instinct muscles, if I'm to use an analogy, and then that becomes the journey for them to become a well-rounded person that uses feelings for things that require feeling, that uses thinking for things that require thinking, and then uses their instincts for things that require instincts.
So there's hope. You can become a well-rounded person. You can think, feel, and use your instincts, even if you have the propensity to lean on one heavily. But once you become aware, you can then do some work to develop the others, right?
100%. That is the job of self-discovery and self-mastery. That is what it is. That is the whole objective of that. The whole objective of becoming a better, well-rounded person. A lot of times in life, what has gotten you to a certain point is not going to get you through to the next point. which is why you have to make a conscious effort to keep developing yourself and build yourself into a well-rounded person. Taking it all the way back to how God created all of us, right? Because God certainly created us all as well-rounded. We come into the world with the ability to think, to feel, and to act. Mm-hmm. However, it is the world, it is the way the world responds to us that makes us focus on one area versus the other.
Wow, Ladi, that's very interesting. But in the workplace, conflict resolution, if you're trying to resolve conflict, maybe you're a feeler and the person is a thinker. So how does this show up in how we resolve conflict?
For me personally, my approach with conflict in the workplace is to first of all make sure we go through a process of understanding our team dynamics. So as a leader, for the teams that I've led, I've always made sure that we understand where we are as a team. The process of trying to understand where you are as a team will unearth a lot of things. It will unearth people's conflict styles. It will unearth a lot more about their personalities. And then that also creates the opportunity to then start to do that work of figuring out, okay, how do we actually stay out of conflict? Because ultimately, the best way to stay out of conflict with people is to understand their communication styles, is to understand your communication style, is to understand what triggers you. What are the things that when somebody does, they annoy you? What are the things that when they do, and what are the things that when you do, it annoys the other person? So when you're able to, within the work environment, put your triggers up front, present your triggers up front to the other people that you are on your team, it will go a long way in reducing the level of conflict that you have to deal with. But the one thing that I feel is most important is to create a culture within the workplace, and this is a role primarily for leaders. You have to create a culture where the team understands where they are at any given point in time, because the root of conflict could be a lot of things. It could be personality differences, and it could be the team development stage that you're in. So when you form a team, if you think about it, when you form a team, like you have a new team that's probably just first, starting to work together. There's a couple of key questions that you as a team have to address. Like, who are you as a team? Who are you as individuals? What needs to be done? Who's going to do what? What are you going to do? What am I going to do? Everybody needs to understand their roles, their responsibilities. You need to understand the skills of the person you have to work with, and they need to understand yours, etc. So a lot of times when we form teams and we're in this stage, we are not yet really dealing with conflict until the actual work starts, okay? Then once the work starts, and either somebody's not pulling their weight or somebody's taking their credit for work you did and those sort of issues, somebody's getting into your business, then all of a sudden it is not working. You now have issues, and you guys need to be able to weather the storm of dealing with how do we get back to a focus on the actual task that is at hand, okay? And then in the process of creating a culture where these are regular conversations, these things are likely to come up. Even just starting every meeting with, where do you guys think we are? Are there any issues that are outstanding? Does everybody understand what needs to be done? Does anybody feel there's anyone here not pulling their weight? Does anybody just having those sort of conversations and giving people an opportunity to even voice their grievances with other members of the team. It gives you an opportunity to put new processes in place in terms of how you're going to work better. And that varies depending on different subject areas. There's the actual work you're doing. Okay, you guys are trying to work together, but certain things are not working. Is there a new process that we can put in place that will improve our workflow? Then you guys can discuss all of that. Are expectations equal? Is what you're expecting from me, does that match what I believe I'm meant to deliver to you? you guys are able to then at least harmonize on those sort of things so that you can get back to the business of focusing on the actual objective that you guys are there to achieve. Go back to focusing on the organizational objective. So creating a culture where you're constantly trying to answer the question, where are we as a team, is really, really important as a leader, because it will also help bring up a lot of the issues of conflict that could potentially come up.
Wow, Ladi, that's very interesting, because especially the bit where you said putting it on the meeting agenda, I was reading something about designing inclusive meetings, right? People say, oh, we want the organization culture to be inclusive. And so like, why do you need, it's not about the talks and, when you come, something happens, you're trying to resolve the conflict, but why don't we just make our meeting inclusive by putting this on the agenda, asking this sort of questions? And you asked you said there were two questions I really picked, like, does everybody understand what they need to do in terms of where do you think we are as a team? And there's a controversial one which you asked. You said, do you think anybody here is not pulling their weight? What if they say, well, you are not pulling your weight?
You have to be open to feedback, because there's an organizational objective that needs to be achieved. And if you're going to be responsible for that failure, then you need to make sure that you're at the minimum doing your best to avoid that failure. But we all have to be open to constructive feedback. There's negative feedback and there's constructive feedback. Okay, and that's part of your job as a leader. Part of your job as a good leader is to figure out ways in which to give constructive feedback to members of your team.
When you said team, I just switched from work to like you and your partner as a team too, because these things apply when you're saying understand the person's communication style, understand your communication style, understand your trigger, and present your trigger to the person. Because I know you somehow transfer. It's not like some people say you're a different person at work and you're a different person at home, but I believe that somehow there's some similar things you transfer from home to work and work to home. So is that the same case in terms of conflict resolution? The tools to resolve conflicts at work, is this same things that you can use to resolve conflicts at home?
For sure, some of them are, but you also, at work, you are interfacing with a lot of different people, and different people are going to trigger you in different ways. Some people at work, because of their own personality and their own approach to work, might anger you. Some people, so somebody who you might consider to be a bit disingenuous, maybe all he does is irritate you because he's not genuine, but he's getting the job done. But then other people at work might make you impatient, okay? And other people at work might make you angry because you just feel they don't take anything seriously. So when you are within the work environment, you could potentially be triggered and experience a wide range of different emotions based on the type of team members that you have. When you go home, within your home relationship, you are with one person. And of course, that one individual can trigger you in a multitude of ways as well. But there's also the possibility that it is a totally different type of triggers that you might experience at home. So it's the key is for you to make sure that you understand what your triggers are. You need to do that first, so that whoever it is that you interface with, be it at work or at home, in the different ways in which you communicate, your communication style at work will obviously be different from your communication style at home. So for the people that you interface with at work, it's in your best interest to find a way to present those things that will trigger you to them up front, just so that they're aware, so that they can do what they can to avoid it. Same thing with your partner in the house. The way you might end up presenting that to your partner in the house would be different. It doesn't have to be as professional because it's your partner, right? You guys talk differently. Your partner in the house, you can tell your partner that you're not. Look, when you are being unserious, I don't like it. It just annoys me. And, please do what you can to avoid that. And they know you are serious, right? But if you speak like that in the work environment, then it might rub someone the wrong way, or whatever the case may be. You would need to find a different way to communicate, the same sort of thing within a work environment. But it's up to you to understand, okay, well, what are the things that actually trigger me, and how do I need to present that upfront to the people that I'm interfacing with, so that it can actually help to minimize the amount of conflict.
Ladi, so can you give an example of constructive feedback?
Okay, so an example of constructive feedback is, and it's whether it's at work, whether it's in relationships, it's the same thing. For me, the best trick, it still remains the sandwich approach. What is the sandwich approach? We all know what the sandwich is. There's bread, there's the meat, and then there's another slice of bread underneath. The reason we're eating a sandwich, we can eat bread anytime we want, but the reason we're eating a sandwich is because of the meat. So constructive feedback is basically you making an attempt to build a person up first before you communicate to them the quote unquote negative information that you feel you might need to tell them. And then you close up your communication again by attempting to build them back up again. So for example, if you have somebody who is constantly turning in their work late, okay, you could basically say to that, you could find whatever is positive about that individual. They might always be turning in their work late and slowing everybody else down. However, they are really, really good at checking in on their other teammates, okay? So you can start with something like that. You can start with letting them know that, look, we really appreciate your contribution to this team, because your ability to check in and make sure everyone is fine is really critical to our overall team success. However, your inability to turn your work in on time is creating a problem for us. We as a team are missing overall deliverables. So if there's a way in which we can support you to help turn in your work on time so that we as a team can meet our deliverables, let us talk about it, because you are a valuable member of this team because of all the other things that you contribute. But we have this problem that we need to resolve. So you've kind of wrapped what you wanted to say around two more positive things. And if the person doesn't understand it, just try and keep positioning it and just try and keep positioning the message. But the thing is that it doesn't do the team any good if you avoid communicating to that person that they're not pulling their weight. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yes, I do. But most people criticize the sandwich approach, saying the person will remember you end the conversation on that good note, and the person just moved on. So people say, why don't you just get the person directly and say, you know what, you're this. So do you think that after you've tried the sandwich and you don't see a good, you don't see any change, then you can go direct?
Okay, so two things. I personally feel like if you use the sandwich approach effectively, it can be effective. You can squeeze commitment out of people using the sandwich approach. So going back to this same example now. Okay, the issue is the person doesn't turn in their work on time. I can start off by saying all the positive things, and then when I get into the meat and I'm explaining to this person that, look, you're impacting the rest of the team by not turning in your work on time. We really need you to make we need to see an improvement in your ability to turn in your work over the next 2 weeks. Is there anything that you need to be able to achieve that? You've created a conversation. Mm-hmm. Yes, it's going to be uncomfortable, but the first thing you've done is you've pulled the person in. Okay, you've pulled the person in by starting off with something positive. It doesn't mean that you don't communicate the hard truth to that person. Mm-hmm. And there's also a lot of things, and so I have the benefit of being a coach. I've led teams for a while, and I understand human personalities probably better than the average person. So it's easy for me to understand the personality of an individual and even know how to have an effective sandwich approach conversation with someone. So there'll be certain people where when I'm having that conversation, it's necessary for me to make them feel like they are in control of the conversation. There are certain people where when I have that conversation, it's necessary for me to make them feel like we're having a very structured conversation. There's a clear agenda, and the information that I'm communicating is also crystal clear. So it depends on. So I'm able to leverage that because I understand human personality, and these are the kind of things I try to teach leaders as well, to just become a little bit more in tune to the different personality types, so that it impacts the manner in which they give feedback. And these are some of the things I also cover when I take teams through team dynamic trainings and issues of that nature. But just to come back to the core of the conversation, when you have a hard truth to communicate to someone, you have to communicate that hard truth to them, especially in a work environment. You just have to try and do it in a way that doesn't strip the person of their humanity, doesn't strip the person of their pride and things of that nature. So the scientific approach does not mean you have to sugarcoat what you need to say. It just means that you present it slightly differently. When you squeeze a timeline out of someone, remember, we're going to squeeze a timeline or a commitment before we move back to the last slice of bread, So in as much as I might have closed the conversation with something positive about you or your contribution to the team, I have squeezed a commitment out of you. Sometimes the conversations, they need to get uncomfortable, okay? The more reason why you should actually use the sandwich approach, because when the conversation gets a bit uncomfortable and you squeeze out whatever commitment or whatever change it is that you're looking for out of the person, then you can then bring the tension back down by closing out with saying something positive. So I don't necessarily agree that the person will walk away only remembering the positive. If you hammered somebody for not doing their job, they'll remember, regardless of what positive you say. What the positive that you say at the end does, it lets them know that they still belong. It lets them know that they're still valued. They're still part of the team. You don't want to leave them feeling like they're out on an island by themselves. That is why I personally believe in the sandwich approach.
Okay, thanks, Ladi. Most people say starting a family impacts women's ambitions rather than men's ambitions. What's the way forward as we have a lot of dual career couples in our generation?
There's going to have to be some cultural shifts that happen. And it starts in the home. It starts in the conversations that we have as husband and wife, as partners. It starts with those hard conversations where men have to realize they cannot have the expectation that maybe their parents had, because we live in a completely different world. Okay, that's just the reality. It starts with us having those conversations, and these are some of the things that my wife and I do when we take couples through relationship coaching and marriage counseling and things of that nature. The world we live in can no longer accommodate the very, very demarcated roles and responsibilities that we used to have. Our parents, at least more of our parents, grew up in a world where, yes, father was a breadwinner, mother was responsible for raising the children. And even when she worked, her career could not be a demanding one, because her primary role was to raise the children. But we live in a different world now. We live in a world where women, we have to come to terms with the reality that women are entitled to their careers as much as men are entitled to their careers. That said, it all boils down to the conversations that you have in your individual homes. If you have a good relationship with your partner, if you folks feel like what is best for your relationship is for one person to take a back seat, then part of that conversation also needs to be how long what's happening within that span of time. You have to keep that other person who's making the first of all, it needs to be seen as a sacrifice. It needs to be acknowledged as a sacrifice. The way you acknowledge something is critical to how you look at it. If you just look at the partner that's, for example, sitting at home or not pursuing a potential promotional opportunity because of how it will impact on the raising of it. If you look at that, if you acknowledge that as a sacrifice that person has made, then ultimately it will lead to conversations that border around, okay, well, what is the impact of this sacrifice on our future? At what point is this person going to stop sacrificing and I start sacrificing? If you are the other partner that is not having to make that sacrifice at that particular point in time. So these are conversations that you need to have. These difficult decisions where a huge sacrifice is involved by one of the parties, they need to be time bound. Even if that goalpost is going to shift, you need to start.
This is the first time I'm hearing someone say like it needs to be a time-bound conversation. I've never heard it that way. I felt like, it's a conversation that has to be had, but you're like, time. So like what else needs to be discussed?
It doesn't have to be static. And it varies and it differs per couple and per your situation or your circumstance. But it needs to be like an ongoing conversation. And so for example, if you're a woman who you sit down with your husband and you have that conversation and the decision is made that, okay, you know what, for the benefit of these kids, you cannot pursue certain careers. Yes, you can work, but it can't be to the detriment of the education and the nurturing of the children. Okay, meaning there's just certain things you cannot pursue. You folks should, between yourselves, agree when you will be able to pursue certain things and when you, the husband, is going to be willing to either take a step back and pick up that slack so that she can go off and fulfill her dreams. Because ultimately, those same children, they will leave the house. And if you both want to have a healthy relationship into your latter years, after you're now empty nesters, it's in your best interest to ensure that you don't create any long-term resentment that one party might hold over the other over the course of your relationship. So you need to think about these things in terms of seasons. There will be a season where one person needs to make a sacrifice, and then there'll be a season where that person should be freed of that sacrifice and should be able to go off and pursue whatever their goals and dreams and aspirations are with the support of their partner or their spouse. And then the acknowledgement that that partner or that spouse will be willing to make a sacrifice at that point in time.
Yeah,
so
great.
That's we've morphed into a relationship coaching, counseling space now. I love it.
Yes,
all things I'm passionate about.
And I wanted to say that I think that's a good point to really tee it up. I wanted to ask some questions around this whole disciplining kids, and there's a way to discipline kids dependent on the kid's personality or something. That's my final.
Okay, so for me, when it comes to kids, I don't think obviously their personality should impact how you discipline them, because one of the things that their personality will highlight for you is it will highlight what they might be avoiding and what they need to focus on. So and obviously that needs to play a role in how you're choosing to discipline the kids. So for example, you might have a child who is a bit of a perfectionist, okay? And they try and do everything perfect, and they make everybody happy by doing so, okay? But that doesn't mean that that child doesn't need to be disciplined because it comes across as if they're doing everything right. That particular child might also be stubborn in other areas of their life. Okay, that particular child might also struggle with understanding when done is done versus perfect. Let me explain that again. There, especially for younger kids who have that tendency to be a perfectionist, they might spend so much time, for example, on homework, that they don't know how to manage their time anymore because they're just trying to get every single thing they do perfect. Your approach for discipline for such a child will be different from a child who's trying to avoid doing homework. Okay, I mean, there's typical discipline issues we'll all struggle with that will cut across all kids. They could be forgetful, they might not clean their room, they might not do certain domestic responsibilities and tasks that you give them effectively. But beyond those, it certainly helps for you to have some sort of understanding of the child's personality, just so that you are able to make sure that plays into the type of discipline structure that you put in place for that particular child.
Awesome. Thanks, Ladi. I've learned a lot. I'm sure this is going to be very valuable. So before you go, we'll play a game on tasks that we do at home. Tasks that we do at home. Would you outsource, delegate, defer, or execute?
Shoot, I'm game.
Cooking.
100% outsource or delegate. I don't cook. I do that one myself.
Washing the car.
Outsource 100% or delegate.
Homework with kids.
Homework with kids. I will prefer to outsource or delegate, but I don't have that option because, again, we've talked about roles and responsibilities. We have 3 kids, so I have to carry at least one. One of them is relatively independent, so we are doing man marking. My wife handles the older son. My daughter is relatively self-sufficient and dependent. So I end up working a lot with my younger son, especially in these times of homeschooling.
Go shopping?
Shopping. Yes, I do that. But shopping for what though? If it's
I'm telling you one like it's tech, anything, clothes.
No, well, I will. Okay, of course, anything tech, clothes. I enjoy shopping. Mm-hmm. I will go to the supermarket, but I'm not going to the market. So that's so we're clear.
Cleaning the house.
No, that one I outsource. We live in Nigeria. I'm sorry, people are looking for work. I don't see why I should be lifting a finger to clean house. I'm creating employment.
Okay, doing dishes, driving.
Doing dishes again, outsource. People are looking for work. Driving, same. I don't like to drive, but I do drive when I have to. Typically on weekends.
Great. So some dilemmas that some people have put in to say this is something that they face when trying to balance between work and life. So do you work late to crush a deadline, or you have date night with your wife?
Honestly, it depends on so many factors. It depends on where your relationship is. It depends on the last time you had date nights with your wife. It depends on how important that deadline is. So it's
a good conversation.
On each. Yeah, I mean, it's for me, a lot of these things are communication. It's conversation. So if I have a deadline, if you're in constant conversation with your partner, you will find that everything is a conversation, and a lot of these issues are so much easier to tackle if you're in constant conversation with your partner. If it comes up that, oh, you need to work late at work, by reflex, you're picking up your phone to message your wife or your husband, babe, I'm stuck at work. what did we have planned? Or if you guys had a date night or whatever planned, you're basically in a position to ask them to contribute to that decision. I feel like, and this is me wearing that relationship coach, marriage counselor hat again. I feel like what every partner wants is to be a part of your decision-making process. That's the best way that you can honor your partner and make them feel that they matter to you. So even if you do have to stay late at work, don't make it sound like you made a decision just by yourself. Well, I'm just going to stay late at work because my job is important. Make your partner feel like they were part of that decision. Oh, babe, sorry, I have to stay late at work. I hope it's okay. And you know your partner. You're able to read whether it's truly okay or not. And at the end of the day, ultimately, if it's not okay, you'll know whether there's fire on the mountain of your relationship or not. And that even in itself would influence the decision that you make at that particular point in time.
Thanks, Ladi, for being a good sport. I think the final thing is a life work advice for parents.
Okay, so I put up a post on social media yesterday, and what it basically said was that the whole idea is to die young as late as possible. And the reason I say that is that we have a limited amount of time on this earth. We have a limited amount of time to raise our families and things of that nature. So let's just make the most out of that limited amount of time, out of that opportunity. Your kids are only young for a period of time, okay? And then they're eventually gonna grow old, and then the relationship, then those young years are lost, okay? So it is very, very important that you spend quality time, not necessarily quantity time. So, and your career and your dreams and your aspirations are also important to you. And it's important that you spend time on that as well. So just try and get it all in as best as you can. And then if one area is going to suffer, for that area that's going to suffer, make sure that when you are doing that one area, you are present and it is quality time that you spend. So if it's your time with your kids that is suffering, make sure that when you are with your kids, you are present, and that is one quality time, and they know that they are the only things that matter in the world to you at that particular point in time. So that's my life works advice.
Thank you, Ladi.
You're welcome.
It takes a village to build a thriving career and family. How do you succeed? How do you make the best decisions wherever you are on your life journey? We all need relatable details and practical action from real people and real situations to move forward. Join Isioma Asiodu Otugo on the Life Work Podcast from Blazers and Baby. Available on Apple, Spotify, and Google Podcast. The Life Work Podcast from Blazers and Baby. Affirmations, roadmaps, and conversations for the modern African family.